Number 1. Let me start by saying I am a 5-foot fuck-all female. I have a baby face that gives the illusion of sweet innocence. Mostly, forever looking like a preteen is advantageous. Sometimes though, it makes me look like an easy target. This is the first of many encounters I unfortunately had, and the one that sticks out the most. I was 17. I worked at a local grocery store in a small, mundane town. Being a high school student, I worked evenings and got out around 10:30 p.m. I walked home alone every single night, and I had worked there since I was 15. It was my area where I grew up, so I never had any fear. Thankfully though, I was still alert. Anyways, on this night I was about halfway home, passing my local 24-hour convenience store. I always became more alert after this point because until then, I was walking on well-lit main roads and I could probably motivate my stubby little legs to sprint to the store if anything happened. After that, it's small residential roads with many dark places to hide, for myself, or anyone else. I walked past the store and noticed a few cars parked outside. Nothing out of the ordinary. I crossed the street and descended into a dark residential area. It's worth noting that not many cars really drive down those streets, especially this late at night. As I'm walking, I see two really bright lights roll up behind me. Obviously a car, and honestly not super strange at this point. I keep walking, but I turn my head to try and see what the car looks like or who might be inside. I can't see shit because this car's lights are super bright. I speed up a little, but this car keeps slowly following behind, creeping closer and closer. I'm full on shitting myself at this point, but I don't quite break into a run because it's still ways to my house and the car could easily catch up to me. This may seem stupid, but I watched a lot of animal nature shows and the one thing they always say is a trademark of prey is running. I guess I thought if I walked confidently enough it would scare them off. At any rate, there was a corner coming up onto a very small road that leads to the street I live on. So, I decide not to go into full-blown panic mode unless this car follows me down this street. I quicken my pace, turn the corner, and look back. The lights are finally out of my eyes, and I can sort of see this car. It had stopped where I had turned. I absolutely shit myself because I remember seeing that car parked at the convenience store, and to my absolute horror, the car slowly starts to turn the corner. I freak out and scramble to my phone, but I fucking forgot it at work like a moron, so I pull out my Apple Touch and pretend it's a phone to at least make it seem like I'm talking to someone. I turn around, I put to ear and look at this car dead in the windshield, and throw it the dirtiest look ever while breaking into a slight jog. I hear the window go down and this motherfucker starts queuing at me like some really lifelike dove noises, and I just fucking book it. I hear the car speed up behind me, and as soon as I turn the corner to my street I dive into one of my neighbour's bushes because I knew I wouldn't be able to make it to my house before the car caught up. I sat and waited. The car came slowly around the corner and stops just ahead of the place I was hiding, and continues queuing. Like, fuck this guy. I was so prepared to sit there for the whole night because I was pretty convinced they didn't know I was there. A couple of tense moments roll by and the car just suddenly takes off. Never have I been so relieved. It was dark, so I didn't catch its plate numbers, and the worst part about it was I saw the car switch off its high beams. All I could think was they must have been turned on to purposely blind me. I stay hidden for a bit because I'm afraid the car is lurking somewhere. Adrenaline eventually took over though, and I just started sprinting home. I then got in the house and started bawling my eyes out. I was absolutely inconsolable. Hyperventilating, full body shakes, dry heaving, the whole 9 yards. I had never been so afraid for my life, and it wasn't until I got home that I finally started to register that fear. It was just my poor 15-year-old brother who was home, and he had no idea what to do. After I calmed down, I called the police, but nothing happened. I didn't have a very good description of the car besides its colour and make, and never saw who was driving. The most terrifying part about this story isn't what happened to me though. The reason why this story sticks out in my mind is because, not a month later, a young girl who was very drunk was snatched from the side of the road, about 10 blocks from where I had been walking, and the guy took her and raped her for 3 days in his basement, but she managed to escape. The house she was being kept in was abandoned, and the guy was never caught. There was no way to know for sure it was related, but I shudder to think what might have happened had I not dove into that bush and been super alert to what was going on that night. Number 2. I lived in a city in central Ohio that begins with a C and has a big college that I lived near. I attended a different college then than the one I mentioned and made the 20-minute drive from the city to that college. I also worked nights as a pizza delivery man in the city and the surrounding suburbs. One night, I had an order in the town where my college is located, which is a smaller suburban city northwest of my home city. Now, this call occurred during what my co-workers and I refer to as the dead hour, which is just before the shop closed at 1 in the morning. I begrudgingly took the pizza, got in the car and plugged the address into the GPS. I noticed that the house was located off on a back road in what looked like a sparsely populated area. Not thinking much of this, I drove up Route 315 to I-270 East and exited. After passing through downtown, the cemetery and the college, I drove through some sub-developments and then onto the smaller road where the house was located. The GPS notified me that I had arrived at my destination, but to my surprise, the house was boarded up. I noticed that there was a small shed in the back of the house that had a small window, and there was a flickering light in the window. At this point, almost every red flag had gone off in my head, but I knew my hard-ass boss would be pissed off if I wimped out on this delivery, so I proceeded towards the shed. As I got closer to the shed, I heard a rustling in the bushes next to the driveway. Then, I heard a man whisper, "Here they come, Billy, 45, 45. At that point, a man jumped out of the bushes and 2 other men jumped out of the shed. They were carrying knives and were wearing these long robes and white masks. I made it back to the car just in time, but one of the assailants managed to slit my arm. As I escaped, I could see the assailant standing in the middle of the road, looking pissed. I probably drove 90 miles an hour on the way back. When I got to the shop, everyone looked shocked. After explaining everything to them, we contacted the police and they dispatched a few officers to the house. When they got there, the assailants were gone. They found some drug paraphernalia in the shed and some ropes and weird torture equipment. I was so glad I made it alive. Number 3. So, this story happened tonight about 2 hours ago. For background purposes, I am a 23-year-old female. My 20-year-old sister and I work in the gym in my apartment complex because my husband has an evening class in the next county over. Tonight was no different. We headed to the gym at about 5:30 and she hopped on the elliptical and I got on a stationary bike. The gym has windows in 3 out of 4 walls, but since it was getting dark I had closed the blinds and turned on the TV when we got there. About 5 minutes into my workout, I noticed that the door hadn't latched when we came in, so I got up to close it. The door only opens if you are a resident and have a key to unlock it, and since I had stupidly forgotten my taser tonight, that made me feel marginally better. So, about 10 minutes later, I glanced to my right where the door is and see this shit. There is an image on the screen. I almost had a damn heart attack but realized it was just a kid messing around. I showed my sister, we both laughed, and the kid, although persistently creepy, eventually left. Another 20 or so minutes go by, and by this time my sister was sitting on the floor with her back to the door, doing some stretches, and I had hopped onto the elliptical. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement at the door. I cautiously glance over and there is an adult black male standing at the door, just staring at my sister. He walked away after a minute, and I figured maybe it was the kid from before's dad, and he was just making sure he wasn't in the gym and got a little distracted. So I shrugged it off. 5 minutes later, he's back at the door, and he's knocking and twisting the knob trying to open it. For a split second, I turned to let him in, assuming he had forgotten his keys or something. But something just told me to keep going on the elliptical like I hadn't heard him. The guy kept on, and it occurred to me it wasn't like a friendly, "Hey, I forgot my key" kind of way, and the guy wasn't dressed to work out. He was wearing jeans and an oversized polo. The guy kept getting more aggressive with the door, and both my sister and I just kept on like he wasn't there. And after a minute, he left. Also, I thought. He started banging on the windows immediately to my left, and I started to panic. My husband was an hour away, and I didn't know who else to call. I ended up calling my best friend's husband, Dave, but he didn't answer. I started to panic and wanted to run, which made me go a lot faster on the elliptical, but I just thought if I ignored the guy and acted like I couldn't hear him, he would leave. My sister had scooted back to where the guy couldn't see her anymore, and was freaking out because we could see the door bowing from the amount of pressure the guy was putting on it. Suddenly, Dave called me back, and I explained what was going on. He wasn't home. He was about 20 minutes away, but said he could come. By then though, the guy had left, and I figured he had finally given up. So, David said he would stay on standby and bring his friend with him to come and get us if we needed it. So I said okay and hung up. No sooner did we hang up, the guy was at the door again, but this time more violent than before. My sister was yelling at me to call Dave back, so I did, and he said he'd be there as fast as possible. The guy at the door left again to bang on the windows, and I took that chance to run over to where my sister was and flip off the lights, so if he could see in the windows, he couldn't be able to see us. So then, my sister and I sat in the dark waiting for Dave. Of course, by the time he showed up, the guy was gone. But it was still creepy as hell. I felt a little dumb at this point and thought maybe I overreacted. But Dave agreed that it was definitely weird because if the guy had lived there, he could have easily used the key to get in. Number 4. This happened to me a few years ago. I was with my older brother Alex, who was 13 at the time, and I was 9. We were walking our family dog Lily when we were about 10 minutes away from home. Lily started barking. I looked in the direction she was barking, and there was an old man sitting on a curb on the other side of the road. He was just sitting there, staring us down. I nudged my older brother and whispered to him to look. He looked over and then back at me. "What about him?" he said. "He's just staring at us," I replied, a bit creeped out by the situation. I then looked back to see the man in the middle of the street. He scared the absolute fuck out of me. "Jeez, dude, you scared me," I said to the man. My brother then grabbed me and told me to hurry up. My dog was still barking at the man. I kept looking back. He was walking in the same direction as us. I suddenly felt a chill up my spine, and Alex noticed it too, and we picked up the pace. We were running for about 5 minutes when we stopped for a break. We sat on a wall catching our breaths, and then we heard footsteps coming towards us. The man was running after us. We then started running as fast as we could home. We went into our garden and started pounding on the door. My heart sank. Our parents were in town and our brother and sister were at her grand's house. "The key under the bin! Alex, get it!" I shouted at him. I then saw the man in front of our garden, and Alex ran to the front door and opened it with the key. The man started sprinting towards us and I ran in and shut the door. I nearly cried from relief. Alex and I then locked all the windows and the back door. I couldn't sleep that night, nor the next. I kept having nightmares about the man and what could have happened if he had caught us. If you've made it this far, you're awesome. Thanks for watching. And of course, don't forget to subscribe, share and like the video. Anyways, on this night I was about halfway home, passing my local 24-hour convenience store. I always became more alert after this point because until then, I was walking on well-lit main roads and I could probably motivate my stubby little legs to sprint to the store if anything happened. After that, it's small residential roads with many dark places to hide, for myself or anyone else. I walked past the store. I keep walking, but I turn my head to try and see what the car looks like or who might be inside. I can't see shit because this car's lights are super bright. I speed up a little, but this car keeps slowly following behind, creeping closer and closer. I'm full on shitting myself at this point, but I don't quite break into a run because it's still not the most. I was 17. I worked at a local grocery store in a small, mundane town. Being a high school student, I worked evenings and got out around 10:30 p.m. I walked home alone every single night, and I had worked there since I was 15. It was my area where I grew up, so I never had any fear. Thankfully though, I was still alert. Anyway. Number 1. Let me start by saying I am a 5-foot fuck-all female. I have a baby face that gives the illusion of sweet innocence. Mostly, forever looking like a preteen is advantageous. Sometimes though, it makes me look like an easy target. This is the first of many encounters I unfortunately had, and the one that sticks out. I noticed a few cars parked outside. Nothing out of the ordinary. I crossed the street and descended into a dark residential area. It's worth noting that not many cars really drive down those streets, especially this late at night. As I'm walking, I see 2 really bright lights roll up behind me. Obviously a car, and honestly not super strange at this point.